Good morning. We're here for the state of Washington versus Carson Connors. Are the parties ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
This is the state of Washington versus Carson Connors, Penal Law 2040.20, disorderly conduct. A person is guilty of disorderly conduct when, with intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, or recklessly creating a risk thereof, he engages in fighting or in violent, tumultuous, or threatening behavior, or he makes unreasonable noise, or in a public place he uses abusive or obscene language, or makes an obscene gesture, or without lawful authority he disturbs any lawful assembly or meeting of persons, or he obstructs vehicular or pedestrian traffic, or he congregates with other persons in a public place and refuses to comply with a lawful order of the police to disperse, or he creates a hazardous or physically offensive condition by any act which serves no legitimate purpose. Disorderly conduct is a violation of the Washington State Penal Law 240.20. And the parties are ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
And Madam Prosecutor, you have your opening statement.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, may it please the court. Tormentor, tyrant, oppressor, bully. We've all been a victim of someone who has belittled us, hurt us, torn us apart. We know how it feels to be made to feel less, small, vulnerable. That's what Carson Connors did to another student when he repeatedly pushed them down the hallway at Bigtown High School on April 27th, 2019. Carson Connors has been charged with a misdemeanor disorderly conduct in violation of Penal Law Section 240.20. Under this law, a person is guilty of disorderly conduct when, with intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, or recklessly creating a risk thereof, the person engages in fighting or in violent, tumultuous, or threatening behavior, among other behaviors not at issue here. To break this down, we, as the prosecution, must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that 1, Carson Connors engaged in fighting or violent or threatening behavior, 2, in a public place, and 3, with an intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm. We acknowledge we have a high burden to meet in this case to persuade you that Carson Connors is guilty of this offense. It is true, Carson Connors is presumed innocent here until proven guilty, and we must prove every element of this crime beyond a reasonable doubt in order for you to find him guilty. However, to have a reasonable doubt of Carson Connors' guilt in order to find him innocent, you must have an actual doubt as to his innocence. You cannot have an imaginary doubt or a potential doubt. There must be an actual, concrete doubt as to Carson Connors' guilt. And we will prove to you today that there is no doubt Carson Connors is guilty of disorderly conduct. The defense will try to convince you Carson Connors did nothing wrong. They will try to convince you all he did was gently pat another student on the back and that this whole situation was manufactured by Lauren Smith, Bigtown High School English teacher, and Bobby Jones, Bigtown High School resource officer, to get Carson Connors out of school the day of the English standardized assessment test, because they believed his score would reflect poorly on Miss Smith and put her job in jeopardy. The defense will also try to convince you Carson Connors was unreasonably targeted and prosecuted based on the school to prison pipeline, in which students are over-policed or are prosecuted for school infractions in the juvenile and adult criminal justice systems instead of being handled in the school disciplinary system. However, we will prove otherwise. We will prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt Carson Connors committed the offense of disorderly conduct by pushing another student in the hallway at Bigtown High School, a public place, with an intent to cause inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm to that student and others present in that public place. We will present eyewitness testimony of Lauren Smith, who has taught and mentored many students in her 15 years of teaching. She will tell you that although she faced the possibility of being demoted to teaching ninth grade English, if the majority of her students did not score well on the standardized assessment. With hundreds of students in her English class, she did not have the time nor a reason to single out one student. We will present testimony of Bobby Jones, school resource officer, who will testify he saw the whole incident unfold on surveillance video and got to the scene quickly after the incident occurred. He will testify he observed Connors cursing and yelling at Miss Smith and aggressively pulling away, causing Jones to become involved. Jones will testify Carson continued to be insubordinate with the school police, causing them to remove him from the school disciplinary system to the criminal justice system. Finally, we will present testimony of Dr. Sidney Crosby, who will testify to the school's no bullying policy and the importance of maintaining an orderly learning environment in a school of approximately 2,000 students. Today, you will hear both direct and circumstantial evidence. Direct evidence is evidence of a fact based on a witness's personal knowledge or observation of that fact. Circumstantial evidence is evidence of a fact that may be reasonably inferred by the existence or non-existence of another fact. You may rely equally on both types of evidence in forming your opinion at the end of this case as to whether Carson Connors is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. At the close of trial, you will all be released to deliberate. At that time, we are confident you will be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Carson Connors is guilty of the offense of disorderly conduct. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Prosecutor. Is the defense ready? If you will unmute.
I apologize, Your Honor. Yes, we are ready.
Proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, may it please the court. Have any of you ever felt targeted by a teacher at school? Like when you forget a piece of homework, or you're late to class, or maybe you got a bad grade on something? Have you ever felt pressure from a teacher to do well on standardized testing? I know I have. This is a case of a student who got targeted by a teacher feeling intense pressure to do well on her standardized testing, and as a result of said targeting, that student was arrested. That's serious. That student was the defendant, Carson Connors. The prosecution will try to make Carson out to be a violent and threatening person, but the prosecution's case is just not true. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can take Carson's word, as he's going to get up on the stand today and tell you his story, what really happened. The prosecution will try to use their witnesses, the police officer and the teacher, to tell you that Carson was being violent, first to another student and then to the teacher, Miss Smith. However, there is no evidence other than what Miss Smith saw from far away to prove that Carson was acting in any sort of violent manner towards another student. The officer will say he saw video footage of the scene, but that video cannot be produced. The other student never came forward. They remain unidentified, and the video was destroyed by a flood. As for this alleged violence towards Miss Smith herself, that was not something Carson engaged in first. Miss Smith was the first to engage and escalate that encounter when she grabbed Carson on the arm. Carson then let out a surprise outburst in response to her grabbing. It was not threatening or violent. There was no planned intent to act this way. He did not knowingly disregard or risk that death or serious bodily injury would occur as a result of his response. How do I know this? It's because Miss Smith never stated that she felt threatened by his behavior. She never stated that she feared for her life or had fear of serious bodily injury, and no other student has come forward either with testimony about this scene. It is because of these facts that Carson should be found not guilty today. Right now, Carson is an innocent person. The only way he is guilty is if after this trial, you, the jury, are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that he has fulfilled all the elements of the crime of disorderly conduct. Beyond a reasonable doubt. That means you cannot doubt for a second that he did it. You have to completely believe that he had the intent or acted recklessly to commit the crime. And the way you come to this decision is if the prosecution convinces you. If you are not convinced completely and fully by the prosecution's case, then you should find Carson not guilty. He is a kid just starting out in his life. He's trying to do right. He works as a cashier and he's in school. And yes, he doesn't get the best of grades, but he cannot be found guilty for that. Miss Smith had the motive to make up this incident and the connections to make it happen. She needed to get her test scores up, and to do that, she could not have Carson at the school. She never liked him. She was going to face serious consequences if she didn't deliver, and she was good friends with the cop that arrested Carson. That, along with the school's already in use policy of sending students to prison for minor incidents, made the perfect combination for her to get Carson out of school on test day. And as you'll hear, it wasn't just Carson, but several other lower scoring students that were suspiciously suspended on test day. Coincidence? I think not. I merely ask you, the jury, to really listen to the evidence and testimony presented here today. And if you're not truly convinced, beyond a reasonable doubt, that every element of the crime of disorderly conduct, which the prosecution has pointed out, includes that Carson engaged in violent behavior in a public place with the intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, are fulfilled, then it is your duty to find Carson not guilty. His future rests with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Upon stipulation of counsel, we are going to instruct the jury at this time of two important instructions. The first is a person commits the crime of disorderly conduct when, with intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, or recklessly creating a risk thereof, the defendant engages in fighting or in violent, tumultuous, or threatening behavior. To convict the defendant of the crime of disorderly conduct, each of the following elements of the crime must be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. 1, that on April 27, 2017, the defendant engaged in fighting or in violent, tumultuous, or threatening behavior. 2, that these acts were committed with intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, or recklessly created a risk thereof. And 3, that these acts occurred in the state of Washington. If you find from the evidence that each of these elements has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt, then it will be your duty to return a verdict of guilty. On the other hand, if after weighing all the evidence, you have a reasonable doubt as to any one of these elements, then it will be your duty to return a verdict of not guilty. Counsel, I suggest we take a recess before we call the first witness for the prosecution.
Thank you,
We'll
Judge.
be at recess.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Is the state ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor.
And call your witness.
The prosecution calls Lauren Smith to the stand.
Ms. Smith, will you raise your right hand? Is the testimony that you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Ms. Smith, can you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Lauren Smith, LaurensSmith.
Thank you. What's your current profession?
I'm an 11th grade English teacher.
And where are you employed?
Big Town High School.
When were you hired by Big Town High School?
In August of 2005.
Awesome. Can you give us your educational background?
I graduated from Washington State University with a bachelor's in English literature and obtained my master's in education from WSU Teachers College. I'm licensed to teach English language arts in grades 7 through 12 in Washington State.
What do you enjoy about your job?
I love literature and reading, so I enjoy introducing young people to this passion. I also enjoy mentoring my students.
Awesome. Is there anything difficult about your job or parts of it that you don't enjoy?
Just the normal challenges of teaching teenagers. Sometimes it's hard to engage them, some have learning differences, and many are experiencing typical teenage angst that distracts them from their studies. However, some come from dysfunctional families.
Objection, speculation on dysfunctional families.
Sustained. The jury is advised to strike that portion of the testimony.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, moving on. Have you ever received feedback on your job performance in the last 15 years of teaching?
Yes. Dr. Sidney Crosby, the assistant principal, has told me that my overall performance has been satisfactory.
Are your students required to do standardized testing?
Yes. Soon after I began my job at Big Town in 2005, we began standardized testing.
And what time of year is the standardized testing proctored?
In May of their 11th grade year.
Does the standardized testing change how you approach your job?
Somewhat, as we have to tailor our curriculum to allow the students to be as successful as possible. The test scores also dictate which colleges our students are able to get into, so I try to tailor my curriculum to give them as good of a chance as possible to score well enough on the test to get into the college of their choice.
Do the students' scores reflect your performance as a teacher in any way?
Yes. As a teacher, my effectiveness in the classroom is measured in large part by the results of standardized testing.
You say you've been administering the standardized testing since 2005. How have your students typically scored on this test over that period of time?
My class's test scores are usually in the mid-range, but overall the scores fell in 2014 and were below average in 2014 and 2015.
What do you think caused this fall in test scores?
Objection, the witness has not been qualified as an expert in psychology of student test scoring.
I'm going to overrule that objection. I believe she is qualified to answer that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to continue. Based on my observations, kids have been more and more distracted from their schoolwork, and it's harder to keep them engaged in learning. I've observed an increase in focus on social media, which has magnified the typical teenage social and personal challenges of navigating a high school.
And did scores continue to fall after 2015 for your students?
Yes. At the end of the 2017-2018 school year, the majority of my students were scoring in the first quartile, which is the bottommost quartile.
Did those scores concern you in any way?
Of course. I believe a handful of my students were experiencing unique personal challenges, which was causing them to perform poorly on the test.
Okay. Was the low scoring just occurring with your students or in other English classes as well across the 11th grade?
The low scoring was occurring across the board in all 11th grade English classes, not just my students.
Was the drop in scoring addressed by school administration?
Yes. In September of 2018, Dr. Crosby had a meeting with all the English teachers in grades 9 through 12. She said she was dissatisfied with the test results.
Hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
The statement the witness was going to testify to by Mr. Crosby was not going to be offered for how Dr. Crosby actually felt about the scoring on the test, but just to show that the administration had addressed the drop in scoring. So it qualifies for hearsay, or it's not hearsay.
Objection overruled. I'll allow the witness to answer.
She said she was dissatisfied with the test results of the 11th grade English classes on the past 5 tests. She stressed that it was the responsibility of the 9th and 10th grade teachers to better prepare the students for the 11th grade test.
What was your understanding of how continued poor performance of your students on the standardized test would impact your career as a teacher?
That it would negatively impact my career. I was given one more chance to get the majority of my students' scores into at least the second quartile or higher. Otherwise, I would be reassigned to teach 9th grade English in the upcoming academic year.
Okay, thank you. You didn't want to teach 9th grade English?
Honestly, I did not. I would have to redo all of my lesson plans over the summer, and I loved the challenge of teaching upperclassmen.
Did you do anything different with your students during the 2018 to 2019 school year to give them a better chance of scoring higher on the standardized test?
Yes, I incorporated more visuals and interactive exercises in the classroom to engage my students. I also gave them quizzes and tests to gauge their progress.
Okay, and how did they respond to this change in your curriculum?
They became more engaged in learning and performed well on the quizzes and tests.
So based on their performance throughout the school year, how did you feel about your students' overall chances of scoring at least in the second quartile on the test?
I was confident that most of my students would score well into the second quartile or higher.
Thank you. Now let's shift to the incident at issue in this case. Do you know the defendant, Carson Connors?
Yes.
And how do you know Mr. Connors?
He was in my 11th grade English class during the 2018-2019 school year.
Have you ever personally had a negative encounter with Mr. Connors?
No, I have not. Other than observing, he isn't interested in learning in my classroom and gets poor grades.
What did you observe on April 27th, 2019?
I saw Carson in the hallway at school repeatedly pushing another student.
Do you know who that other student was?
No, the student had his back turned to me and ran away after Carson had pushed him.
What did you do after observing this incident?
I told Carson to go with me to Dr. Crosby's office because the school's no bullying policy requires all incidents to be reported to the assistant principal. I lightly touched his arm in an attempt to lead him to Dr. Crosby's office.
And how did Carson react to this?
He refused to go with me, pulling away and screaming at me.
So then what happened after that?
Bobby Jones and Zeke Baldwin, who are the high school resource officers, apparently saw the altercation on their surveillance cameras and they rushed to the scene.
How did Carson act towards them that you observed?
Carson continued to be belligerent towards them, screaming he was not going to the assistant principal's.
Hearsay.
Overruled. Overruled. She may answer. She observed.
Can you repeat your answer, please?
Carson continued to be belligerent towards the officers, screaming that he was not going to the assistant principal's office.
So Carson was generally not cooperating with you or the officers?
Yes.
How did the officers handle the situation when Carson wouldn't cooperate with them?
The officers had arrested Carson for disorderly conduct.
Is Big Town High School a public place?
Yes.
Did Carson's behavior cause you to be annoyed or alarmed in any way?
Not particularly.
Do you believe that Carson's conduct would cause a general person, public figure, to be annoyed or alarmed?
Here's our objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Do you think Carson Connors acted intentionally on April 27th, 2019?
Yes.
Are you friends with Officer Bobby Jones?
Yes, I am friends with him.
How do you know Bobby?
We grew up together.
Did you have anything to do with Bobby getting his job at Big Town High School?
I recommended him for the job of high school resource officer.
Okay. Do you react with Officer Jones at school?
Yes, we talk during the school day and frequently eat lunch together in the faculty lounge.
Have you shared with Officer Jones the challenge you're facing regarding standardized testing scores?
Yes, I have confided in Bobby about the low test scores and that I will have to teach 9th grade English if the scores do not improve.
Have you solicited Officer Jones's help in any way in creating a plan to remedy this challenge?
No, I did not. I only confided in him as a friend. There's nothing he would be able to do about the student test scores anyway.
Did Officer Jones offer to help you in any way regarding this matter, your issues?
He asked if there was anything he could do to support me emotionally, which is all he could do since he's not a teacher or school administrator.
What day was the standardized test administered in 2019?
May 2nd.
And was Carson in attendance to take this test?
No, he was not, due to his process hearing for the incident we had just talked about.
All right, 1 second. Did Carson Connors end up making the test up?
Yes, he did on May 23rd.
How did your students do overall on the assessment?
The students who took the test on May 2nd did fairly well on it, with a majority making it into the second quartile or higher.
And did Carson's score count towards this overall average?
No, because he took the test on a later date.
Do you know how Carson scored on the exam?
I can't say for sure.
Did his absence on May 2nd help the overall successful outcome of your students' score on the exam, on the assessment?
I don't know. The students worked really hard throughout the year to learn the material to be successful on the exam. I also worked really hard to come up with different and creative ways to teach my students the material. If anything contributed to the students' success on the exam, it was that.
Do you know how many students are in the 11th grade at Big Town?
There are 2,000 students in the high school, so approximately 500 students in the 11th grade.
Does that mean you have quite a few students to teach and keep track of?
Yes, it does.
And for each of these students, do you face unique challenges in teaching them?
Yes, as I said, my students are more and more distracted each year, and many students have their own unique learning challenges.
So multiplying these challenges by the number of students you teach, does it make it challenging for you to keep your students engaged and motivated?
Yes, it does.
Teaching 11th graders, are you also helping students get ready for college?
Yeah. In addition to teaching and giving them the academic tools to be successful in college, I also mentor my students regarding college.
And how do all of these responsibilities affect your time?
I'm very busy in and outside the classroom with engaging with students, preparing lessons, brainstorming effective ways to keep my students engaged, and everything else that goes with being a teacher.
What else do you do outside of being a teacher in your free time?
I like to hike and ride my bike, and I'm actively searching to find a partner who I can start a family with.
Did you and Bobby Jones hatch a scheme to keep Carson Connors out of school on May 2nd so his score would not count towards the overall average of the class?
No, we did not. I don't have the time to hatch elaborate schemes against one student.
So do you believe it was Carson Connors' fault he was not in school the day of the test?
I do believe it was his fault. I saw him with my own eyes push the other student down the hall, then act belligerently towards me and the student resource officers.
Is it annoying to you when someone acts belligerently towards you?
Yes.
Thank you. That is all I have. Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Do you have cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Hi, Ms. Smith. How are you?
Good.
All right. Would you consider teaching English at the high school your dream job?
Yes, I would.
And did you grow up in a town neighboring Big Town?
Yes.
Do you think you've had a successful teaching career?
I would say so, yes.
And objectively, the school measures the successfulness of your teaching career based on the students' standardized test scores. Is that right?
Yes, it does.
So in order for the school to consider you a successful and effective teacher, you would need to have your students attain a certain level of test results, right?
Correct.
Your students usually test about mid-range. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is it true that in 2014, the scores fell to well below average?
Yes, they did.
And they've remained low ever since?
Besides this past year, yes.
And you attributed those low scores to a handful of students who had personal problems?
That and the overall student population not being engaged in class.
And you did not believe that was due to any teaching problems from you, right?
Correct.
And the vice principal, Dr. Sidney Crosby, agreed with you?
Yes.
But then in September 2018, Dr. Crosby informed the English department that it was them, the teachers and not the students, which included you, that needed to do more to prepare the students for testing. Is that right?
Dr. Crosby specifically said it was the 9th and 10th grade teachers that needed to make the students well prepared for the 11th grade test.
And did Dr. Crosby also state that if your students did poorly again, your career would be negatively impacted?
Yes.
Did Dr. Crosby pull you aside and inform you that you had one more chance to get your students to do well on the test?
Yes.
And the consequence of not accomplishing this was to be assigned to teach 9th grade English, which in your own words would be horrible and almost as bad as getting fired. Is that correct?
I would not say it was as bad as being fired, but that is the consequence, yes.
That is what you testified to in your affidavit. So I'm assuming you're in line with your affidavit. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you're pretty motivated to have good test scores, right?
Yes.
Probably even more motivated than usual due to the fact that this was your last chance, right?
Correct.
Did you feel like you were under a lot of pressure?
Yes, I did.
And you testified you know the defendant, Carson. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
He's in your English class.
Yes.
Do you consider him a troublesome kid?
Yes, I do.
Does he do poorly in school?
Yes.
At least in your class anyways, because you can't testify to any other classes. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
You know why he does poorly in school? Like, do you think it's because he might learn differently or have a tough home situation? Or are you just assuming based on his poor grades that he just does poorly in school?
From my observations, he does poorly in my class.
But I was under the impression that you loved mentoring your students and you loved the challenge of teaching upperclassmen. Is that right?
Correct.
But apparently you don't love that as much if you tried. But apparently, I'm sorry. But apparently you have not tried mentoring Carson. Is that right? If he's still doing poorly in your class.
I have not been given the opportunity as he is disengaged with the learning.
Do you think if you had tried mentoring him more that he would have a higher likelihood of better grades?
No, I do not think so.
So you think his poor grades are not because he's not engaged in class, but something else that's going on in his life?
I think it's both, yes.
So do you think the part that, since the involvement in class, the fact that you just testified that he's disengaged, if you had worked harder to engage him, that he would therefore have better scores?
Yes.
Let's turn to the incident on April 27th. You claim to have seen Carson push another student in the hallway on this day, right?
Correct.
But then you couldn't identify the other student. Is that right?
Correct.
Were you next to the two students when this incident occurred, or were you just in the same hallway?
I was in the same hallway.
Did you talk to this unidentified student that Carson supposedly pushed?
No, he had ran away before I got the chance.
Has anyone to your knowledge been able to identify this student?
Not that I'm aware of.
And after you saw this incident, were you able to check and see if the other student was all right?
I could not because I was more engaged with bringing Carson down to the vice principal's office.
And so you don't know for sure whether that student felt threatened or annoyed or alarmed in any way because you weren't able to talk to them. Is that correct?
Correct.
And did Carson say he did not want to go to the vice principal's office because he was afraid of being late for his next class?
No, he was just screaming and acting belligerent.
Do you think he was afraid of being late to his next class at all? Like that played into it at all?
It could have been, but I do not believe so.
Did you touch Carson in an effort to get him to go to the vice principal's office?
Yes, I had lightly touched his shoulder to guide him to the principal's office.
But you did reach out to touch him, is that correct?
Yes.
And Carson reacted to this unwanted touching by moving away and telling you to keep his hands off him, among other things?
Yes.
Did this outburst seem like a surprised outburst or something he planned to say?
A surprise.
Did you admit in your statement or at any other time that you felt threatened or fearful from his behavior?
No.
And you just testified earlier that you weren't particularly alarmed or annoyed by his behavior. Is that correct?
Yes.
Objection, misstates witness's testimony.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
I actually wrote down what she said, and she said, not particularly, as to Stephanie's question of, did you feel annoyed or alarmed by Carson's behavior? And she responded, not particularly. I wrote that down.
And then later, when I asked if
But that wasn't referring to Carson's behavior. That was referring to someone acting belligerent, not Carson particularly.
I'm sorry, may I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
I asked in the reference of Carson's belligerent behavior, if someone acts belligerently, is it annoying? And the witness responded, yes.
So you're admitting that she has inconsistent statements in her testimony?
I am going to, I'm not going
I'm
to
sorry,
have
would you like to
counsel,
respond?
counsel are not going to argue at this point. I'm going to I'm going to overrule the objection. She can answer at this time. You can address it, Madam Prosecutor, on redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm just going to repeat the question for you, Ms. Smith. Did you testify earlier today that you were not particularly annoyed or alarmed by Carson's behavior?
Yes, I said that.
And did you ever call for help because you felt Carson's behavior was violent or because you felt at risk for any sort of serious injury or death?
I had not called for help, but the resource officer still came.
And did you and Carson ever get to the vice principal's office, or did the vice principal ever come to you?
No.
But the police officers did come, is that right?
Yes.
And those officers were Bobby Jones and Zeke Baldwin, is that right?
Correct.
And you're pretty close with Bobby, right?
Correct.
You guys have been close friends for years, often spending time together throughout the day, is that right?
Yes.
Was he aware that your teaching position was in jeopardy when he came running to help you?
He would have been aware, yes.
Did he ever ask you if there was anything he could do to help you?
He did, but only as emotional support.
Did the police officers arrest Carson right there?
Yes, they did.
So he never interacted with the vice principal?
Correct.
And you told them what happened,
Yes.
and they charged him with disorderly conduct?
Mm-hmm.
And was that charge based on his alleged assault of the other student or his outburst towards you, in your opinion?
I would say his outburst towards the officers.
And did the officers ever tell you if they felt threatened or fearful of his behavior?
No, they did not.
Did Carson get suspended as a result of his arrest?
Yes.
Do you think he should have received a harsher punishment?
No, I do not.
Was he suspended on the day that the standardized testing took place?
Yes, and he was at a hearing for the incident.
The standardized testing took place on May 2nd, is that correct?
Yes.
And his hearing was set for May 1st, is that correct? Do you know?
I cannot say for sure.
I would just like to state for the record that Carson's hearing was May 1st and the tests were May 2nd. Was there any evidence that Carson allegedly pushed the other student besides your own eyewitness account and the video footage?
No.
And is that tape part of the evidence today?
Yes.
Are you sure?
I have not looked at the evidence, but
For the record, the tape is not part of evidence today as it was destroyed in a flood. Did the student who Carson allegedly pushed come forward as a witness?
no.
Did the student ever give a statement that Carson was being violent or threatening towards him or her?
Not that I know of.
Do you know if any other students or teachers were around when this incident occurred?
No, not that I know of.
Were any of the other low-performing students also suspended on the day the testing took place?
I do not believe so, no.
I believe your own affidavit says that several other students in your English class who had relatively poor academic records were also under the out-of-school suspension on May 2nd and did not take the test. Would you agree with your own affidavit?
Yes, I would.
Very good. And are you still teaching 11th grade English?
Yes.
So the remaining students must have done all right on their scores then?
Yes.
Position. Enough to keep you your dream job?
Yes.
That's all I have. Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Ms. Grover, redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Smith, you testified student engagement has decreased in recent years.
Yes.
And can you repeat for us why you believe the student involvement has decreased in recent years in school?
I would say because of the uprise in social media and how students have a harder time navigating through high school with the use of social media.
And you believe that that has negatively impacted their performance in school and on tests?
Yes.
Do the standardized test scores reflect on the students at all, such as helping them get into the college of their choice?
Yes, they do.
So the test scores not only reflect on you, they also reflect on the students. Is that right?
Correct.
Is that one of the reasons that, in addition to the fact that the test scores reflect on you as an educator, is that also one of the reasons that you place such a large emphasis on the students doing well on this test?
Yes.
Has Carson ever shared his situation with you or sought your help or mentorship?
No.
So you didn't know, I mean, you knew that Carson had low grades in your classes, but you didn't know of any personal challenges that he was facing?
No.
Since you testified that you have approximately 500 students, or there are approximately 500 students in 11th grade English, is it difficult to seek out and mentor every aspect of every student's life?
Yes.
Objection, leading.
Overruled. Overruled. She may answer.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you repeat your answer, please?
Yes, it is very difficult.
Do students have to have some sort of personal responsibility to seek out help from you or mentorship from you if it's needed?
Yes.
Okay. Did Carson Connors call you an idiot when you tried to take him to the assistant principal's office?
Yes, he did.
Did you testify that Carson's belligerent behavior was annoying to you?
I would not use the term annoying.
But you said in direct examination that it was annoying to you. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. The student that Carson Connors allegedly pushed in the hallway, did he stick around after Carson pushed him, or did he flee?
No, he had ran away.
Okay. Would you flee if you didn't feel threatened by a situation or like you didn't want to be there? Or would you stick around?
I would have stuck around.
So if you felt
Objection,
threatened,
speculation on to this, like to what the student was feeling or thinking at that time.
Counselor, you want to address that?
I believe that her answer is based on her observations of what she saw Carson Connors do in the hallway and how it would have made her feel had she been in that student's shoes.
Sustained. Objection.
Okay. Is it typical for student resource or school resource officers to become involved with interactions such as occurred on April 27th when they've escalated past the point of what a teacher could handle?
Yes, I believe that is part of their job.
Okay. Did you have anything to do with when Carson Connors' process hearing was? I think it was scheduled for May 1st, 2019.
I did not.
Okay. And did you have anything to do with the time period of his suspension when it occurred?
No, I did not.
Okay. So you didn't designate that he be suspended on specifically May 2nd, which was the day of the standardized test?
I did not.
Objection leading.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
I did not lead her to a specific answer. She is free to answer yes or no.
Overruled.
Do you want me to ask the question again?
Yes, please.
Did you specifically designate that Carson Connors be suspended on May 2nd, which was the day of the standardized test?
I did not.
Okay. Do you think Carson Connors' punishment was commensurate with his actions on April 27th of 2019?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any recross, Counselor?
Yes, Your Honor, 1 second. Ms. Smith, were you aware that suspensions took place when arrests occur?
Yes.
And were you able to testify to any details about the other student that Carson supposedly bullied?
No.
But you were supposedly close enough to see this alleged bullying, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you think it's a teacher's job to mentor their students?
Objection. I believe the defense has reached their recross question limit of 3 questions.
Counselor, you want to address that?
I was not aware. I only had 3 questions, and if that's the case, then I concede.
All right, sustained.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
There being nothing further, this witness is excused. Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Thank you.
Court will be at recess. Will the state call the next witness?
The state would like to call Officer Bobby Jones to the stand.
Officer Jones, if you'll raise your right hand. Is the testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
It is.
Thank you, sir.
Officer Jones, can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yes, it's Bobby Jones, Bobbiejones.
What's your current occupation, Officer Jones?
I'm an officer with the Big Town Police Department, currently assigned to Big Town High School as a school resource officer. That's SRO.
And how long have you held this position?
Since 2013.
Great. What's your educational and employment background?
I have an associate's degree in criminal justice, and I've been with the Big Town Police Department since 2004. Before that, I was a security guard at the Big Town Savings and Loan.
Is it safe to say you've had extensive law enforcement experience?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any challenges associated with your job as an SRO?
Yes, there are 2,000 students in that school, and we're responsible to preserve a safe learning environment for them. And there's always, a group of bad kids who we have to keep an eye on them.
Okay. So kind of going into the history a little bit of your position at the high school, how did you get your job as an SRO at Big Town High School?
Lauren, my good friend Lauren Smith, she's a teacher at Big Town High School, and she was on the search committee for the SRO position, and she recommended me for the job.
Okay. So do you feel like you owe Miss Smith for getting you this job?
Well, on some level I do. I mean, I know I was qualified for the position, which is why I ultimately got the job, but her recommendation obviously helped me secure the position.
Okay. Okay. How good of a friend are you, or how good of friends are you and Miss Smith?
I'd say we're good friends. We've known each other a long time.
Are you good enough friends to confide in each other when you're having struggles in your life?
Oh, yeah, for sure. We both vent to each other about things that are frustrating to us.
Okay. Has Miss Smith confided in you about anything recently that's been a challenge for her as an educator?
Yeah, she's expressed a lot of frustration at the school testing system, and how recently, it's all about the scores, and if the student scores fall, then they start threatening to take her away her job and stuff like that. So, she's got to always be worried about the scores a lot.
Okay. Did she mention any particular students that have been giving her trouble last year during the school year?
No, she didn't. She didn't single out any students. I mean, we all know who the bad apples are, right?
Okay. So switching gears, can you describe the events that occurred on April 27th, 2019?
My partner and I were down in the basement monitoring the security videos when we saw Carson Connors push another student in the hallway at the school. Miss Smith, she happened to be walking down the hallway at that time, and she witnessed the incident, so she confronted Carson. We saw Carson then start mouthing off to Miss Smith and resisting her attempts to lead him somewhere.
So what did you do after you witnessed this?
Well, my partner and I ran to the scene to assist Miss Smith.
And what did Carson do when you got to the scene?
He was having a full-on tantrum by that time, cursing up a blue streak, yelling at Mrs. Smith, aggressively resisting her attempts to lead her into the assistant principal's office. Bad.
How did Carson act towards you?
Oh, he cursed at us too. He yelled at me, and he resisted our attempts to take him to the assistant principal's office.
So what did you do?
We arrested him for disorderly conduct, which is the only thing we could do at that point.
Was this incident caught on video?
It was.
And what happened to the tapes of this incident?
Well, they were put in a desk drawer for safekeeping down in our office in the basement, but over the weekend, the office where they were kept was flooded, and so they were ruined.
So there's no video proof of this incident, is that correct?
No, there is not. But I remember exactly what I saw.
Is Big Town High School a public place?
Yes.
Thank you. And did you feel threatened or annoyed or alarmed by Carson's behavior on April 27th?
I would say no more than usual. I mean, those children are a handful. I expect that to happen when I go to work.
But was the experience annoying or alarming to you?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
How did that experience on April 27th, 2019, in dealing with Carson Connors make you feel?
Well, I felt sorry for Miss Smith because, you know, it's those sorts of outbursts when a teacher gets wrapped up in that, it's like almost the teacher becomes responsible for it. She could lose her job over something like that. And it's not fair that you know, some young hooligan can have an outburst and then the teacher becomes responsible. That's just not right. So I guess I was upset in that respect. But I've seen plenty of outbursts from kids over the years. So
Okay. Do you believe that in general, to a general person of the public, representative of the public, Carson's behavior would have been alarming or at least annoying?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Do you believe Carson Connors acted intentionally on April 27th, 2019?
yes.
Switching gears, do you know when the 11th grade students at Big Town High School take their standardized tests each year?
Not exactly. It's near the end of the year at some point.
Were you aware that if Carson Connors was not at school the day the test was administered, his score would not be counted towards the overall test scores of Miss Smith's students?
No.
Okay. Did you and Miss Smith hatch a scheme to frame Carson for disorderly conduct to get him out of school on the day of the test?
No.
Okay. How many students are at Big Town High School?
2000.
Okay. And you're responsible for the safety of all those students as well as the faculty and the staff?
That is correct.
Okay. Is that a time-consuming job?
It is.
So is it safe to say you don't have time, or do you have time to concoct elaborate plans to frame individual students?
No, I do not.
How do you feel about Carson Connors?
Well, honestly, I don't like him.
Do you think Miss Smith likes him?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Do you know Dr. Avery Johnson?
Yeah, I do.
How do you know Dr. Johnson?
You testified against me and the city in a case where I was accused of using excessive force against a student.
And what was the outcome of that case?
It was ultimately dismissed.
So Dr. Johnson's testimony did not ultimately cause you harm?
No, it did not.
Do you have any ill feelings towards Dr. Johnson?
Well, I don't really like him either.
Okay, and why is that?
Well, I think he made up allegations about me in that case because he wanted to get me fired.
Do you believe if he made up things in past cases, he may make up things in other cases?
Yeah, I do believe he's capable of making up allegations to support whatever story he's trying to create.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for now. Thank you, Officer Jones.
Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hi, Officer Jones. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Okay. So you've known Miss Smith for a long time, is that right?
That is correct.
You guys grew up together?
Not so much, but I've known her for many years.
So you would say you're fairly good friends then?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you testified that she recommended you for the job that you're currently in, is that right?
That is correct.
Do you and Miss Smith ever sit together at lunch?
Um, I don't think so. No, not really.
In your affidavit, you testified that you and Miss Smith sit together at lunch. So I'll ask again, do you and Miss Smith ever sit together at lunch?
I think yes, occasionally.
And were you aware of her situation in which she felt pressure to get better test scores this year?
Yes, I was aware of that.
And were you willing to help her in any way?
Well, it's not really my job to help a teacher have their students have good scores beyond just making sure the school is a safe place for the kids to take tests.
But did you tell her that you'd be willing to help her in her current hard situation?
No, I don't think so.
Very well. You testified that you both know who the quote bad apples are. Would you or Miss Smith consider Carson a bad apple?
Most definitely.
Were you one of the officers that responded to Miss Smith and Carson on April 27th?
Yes.
And you said in your affidavit that you responded because of what you saw in the video footage. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The same video footage that is now missing?
That is correct.
And the other officer, is he testifying here today?
I don't believe so.
And did he make a statement that's included in the affidavits for today? Do you know?
I'm not certain if he testified or not, ma'am.
And did you get the vice principal as is standard procedure for school discipline, or did you and your partner arrive on the scene?
I'm sorry, could you ask me that again?
Yes. Did you and your partner go straight to the scene where Carson and Miss Smith were, or did you go get the vice principal to deal with school discipline as is school procedure?
I believe we proceeded directly to the scene because of how violent Carson was acting.
And was the charge based solely on the alleged events that Carson had assaulted another student and was then supposedly causing a disturbance?
Yes.
And just to clarify, that incident was witnessed solely by Miss Smith and then the video that you saw, is that correct?
And myself and the other officers sitting down watching the video, yes.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't go to arrest Carson after the incident with the other student, did you?
No,
You didn't go till after he and Miss Smith started their altercation, is that correct?
I think that the initial incident was just a shove.
But that was the basis for your arrest, as you just testified, correct?
It was more that he was resisting he was resisting us asking him to calm down. He got escalated after the fact of Miss Smith trying to intercede on that situation. So it was more about protecting Miss Smith at that time.
So you admit that Miss Smith interceded to begin with, and then Carson reacted to her interceding. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that's what happened.
And so it was once Miss Smith actually got involved that you went running to help her. Is that correct?
Correct.
And how did you know that that was the cue, or rather the time to go and help?
Well, the initial shove that Carson did to the other student, you know, you see that kind of stuff all the time, and very often it just kind of washes off and nothing happens from it. But in this case, when Miss Smith addressed Carson, he became more escalated, and that was when it became apparent that he was going to have a tantrum.
So you didn't get a statement from the other student that Carson supposedly shoved?
No, you know, we couldn't tell who it was on the videotape.
You don't know if that student felt threatened or feared for his or her life or of serious physical injury?
It wouldn't surprise me. Carson is known to go off every now and then on students.
But you don't know that for sure, whether that student felt threatened or scared, because you never got a statement from them. Is that correct?
We did not get a statement from that student because
And did Miss Smith ever tell you that she felt threatened or feared for her life?
I know that she has her hands full with.
Can you please answer with a yes or no? Did Miss Smith ever tell you that she felt threatened or feared for her life?
No.
And did you ever see, or did you state if there was any other students around at the time of this incident?
I did not see any others at that point. It was a passing period, and so by the time it had just become something between Miss Smith and Carson, the halls had emptied out.
So if the halls were empty, it wasn't really public in front of other people, right?
It's a public school.
But if there was no other people around, that's not really public, right?
I don't know, ma'am. I would say it's a public school and everything that happens there is public in some respect.
But there was no other students around to your knowledge, correct?
Correct.
Did you read Carson his rights when you arrested him?
I assume I did, yes.
Was that in your affidavit that you read him his rights?
Objection. This assumes facts that are not within our fact pattern.
So, do you want to address that? Defense?
It just wasn't stated in his affidavit that he read the rights, and so I just would like to have a clear yes or no answer if it was in his affidavit whether he read the rights.
We don't have those facts.
So he can say no.
Well, I would assume if I'm doing my job and I'm arresting somebody, I'm reading their rights.
Thank you, Officer Jones. And did you let Carson call his parents before you took him to the station since he's a minor?
I assume I would have.
In your affidavit, it said he wasn't able to call his parents till an hour after you arrived at the station. So would you like to rephrase your answer to that previous
Objection. Relevance.
Overruled.
I'll repeat my question if that's okay, Your Honor. Did you let Carson call his parents before you took him to the station since he's a minor?
No, I believe that he was upset to the point where he just needed to be removed from the school grounds.
So he wasn't able to call his parents until later. Is that correct?
I would agree with that.
Thank you, Officer Jones. That's all I have.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Officer Jones, when you and Miss Smith ate lunch together, did she confide in you about, in general, like all of the students in her classes that were low achieving, or did she just single out one student who was causing her particular problems?
I would say that it was overall just, everybody at the school, like I said, knows who the bad students are. When it comes to low achieving students, I think generally the teachers feel that's their problem and they take it on themselves more. So no, she would not point out specific low achieving students so much as just be concerned about the testing itself being the issue.
Okay. Did you try, when you arrived on the scene on April 27th, did you try to take Carson Connors to the assistant principal's office before arresting him?
I would say that would have been the standard procedure. Yes, I think that he was too violent at that point to really go anywhere without being restrained. So.
And so did you proceed to arrest him because he was not cooperating with going to the assistant principal's office?
Yes.
Okay. You testified a little bit to this in cross-examination, but I just wanted to kind of go back to it a little bit. So your arrest on April 27th of Carson Connors, was that based on the whole of the events that occurred on that date by Carson?
Yes. On that specific day, that singular event was the one that escalated. I mean, he's got a history in the school of being trouble.
So
But
your arrest was based on the altercation between him and the other student and then the escalation of that?
yes.
Okay. So you, after witnessing the interaction between Carson Connors with Miss Smith on the video surveillance, you went to help her because the situation was escalating out of a situation that she could handle on her own, or is that safe to say?
I would say that is correct.
The student that Carson allegedly pushed, did that student stick around, or did that student flee the scene?
They fled. And I think, that's what happens with these kids, because Carson's a bully, and you don't want to snitch on him or he's going to come after you later. And they all know that. So they didn't want to get dragged into it.
So that student didn't stick around to defend Carson's actions?
Oh, definitely. I don't think they would.
Okay. You testified that a school is a public place, so no matter who's around, you would say a school is a public place. Is that right?
No, that's correct.
Are officers, teachers members of the public?
Yes.
All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Anything further, counsel?
No, Your Honor.
All right, then, Officer Jones, thank you for your testimony. You are excused at this time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Officer Jones.
Court will be at recess. The Superior Court of the State of Washington is now in session. Madam Prosecutor, are you ready to call your next witness?
I am, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Dr. Sidney Crosby to the stand.
Dr. Crosby, would you raise your right hand? Is the testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Hi, Ms. Crosby. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Sidney Crosby, Sidney Crosby, Crosby.
Thank you. Dr. Crosby, where are you currently employed and what is your position?
I am currently the assistant principal at Big Town High School, and I've been here since 2007.
Thank you. What is your educational background?
I received my bachelor's degree in English literature with a minor in secondary education from the University of New Mexico in 1986. And then I obtained my master's degree in 1988 and got my Washington teaching certificate in 89. I continued and earned my PhD in educational administration from the School of Education at SUNY Albany in 2001.
Great. And can you give us a little bit of a background on your employment history?
Of course, I worked part-time for a private security company while I got my master's degree. And after getting my teaching certificate in Washington, I taught high school English for a few years. While obtaining my PhD, I continued to work through various school settings. And then after getting my PhD, I worked in different educational management positions until accepting the job I currently have as assistant principal at Big Town High School since 2007, and I've been here ever since.
So is it fair to say you've not only had extensive educational training, but also extensive experience in a variety of educational settings?
Yes, it is.
Is it also fair to say you've seen the education field go through a lot of changes during your long career?
Yes.
Can you describe some of the changes that you've observed over your career?
Yeah, schools have been more and more responsible for aspects of students' lives that should be addressed at home. Schools are now required to teach things that they should be learning at home from their parents, for feeding them 2 meals a day, monitoring their personal behavior on and off campus, and in addition to all of our normal responsibilities of teaching them subject matter and making sure that they pass certain testing to move forward.
Based on your observations, why do you think these changes have occurred?
I believe that
Speculation.
Can you repeat your objection?
Speculation.
Overruled.
You can answer the question.
Okay, I believe that these changes are really stemming from the continued lack of parental involvement in children's lives, from teaching them basic life principles to disciplining them, and then that has since fallen on the school.
Okay, so based on your observations, how has parental involvement in a child's education evolved over the years?
Objection. Speculation. The witness has no reason to know about parental involvement when they're the assistant principal of the school with just the students and not parents.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
This is just based on the witness's observations as to what she's seen between parents and children over her career.
I think the groundwork has been laid as to her expertise. I will allow her to answer. You may answer the question, Dr. Crosby.
Okay, I see that parental involvement has become less and less. We used to see parents all the time at school functions. Parents used to communicate a lot more with their children's teachers and the faculty than they ever do now.
Great, thank you. Based on your observations, how has the need for school discipline of students evolved over the years?
School discipline has skyrocketed due to that increase of student bullying and insubordinate behavior.
So does this place an extra burden on the teachers and faculty of the school?
Absolutely. I believe that not only do we have to teach them subject matter like we always have, but we've had to address these personal needs and shortcomings as well. Essentially, we're serving as parents for these kids.
Okay. How many students attend Big Town High School?
Approximately 2,000.
So does discipline become difficult and time consuming when you project the problems you're seeing to a magnitude of 2,000 students?
Yes, absolutely.
So how do you manage that?
We have to take discipline of students really seriously. We have a no tolerance policy for bullying. We try to quickly address and get ahead of problems before they're blown out of proportion.
If a student is truly innocent, would you discipline them?
We may question them to get to the bottom of the problem, but if it turns out that they're innocent, we don't discipline them. We don't have the time or the resources to discipline students who are not causing trouble, nor would we want to disrupt their learning environment. with unnecessary discipline.
What do you think of this so-called school to prison pipeline rumored at the school? Do you believe students are unnecessarily being sent into the criminal justice system for offenses that should be dealt with at the school?
We do the best that we can to deal with troublemakers within the school disciplinary system, but with having so many students and bullying becoming a bigger and bigger problem, we can't properly address those students who refuse to comply with our rules and the discipline policies with our limited resources. Those students are the ones who end up in the criminal justice system, unfortunately.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about standardized testing at Big Town High School. Why does Big Town administer standardized testing?
As with everywhere, the standardized testing helps us to gauge how we're doing teaching our students each year and to incentivize our school to keep educational standards up and continue rising.
Is it important to you for the school as a whole to perform well on the standardized testing?
Yes, it is, as it is up to the administration to really ensure teachers are meeting these educational standards and enabling students to score at a certain level on a test.
So how do you incentivize teachers to meet these standards?
I make it really clear to all the teachers that poor scores will play a part in their performance evaluations.
And how do the teachers feel about this?
I think they appreciate my position on this, as they want students to perform well as well. The teachers work really well with the administration because they know it's for everyone's benefit.
Okay. Do you know Billy Joe Stapleton?
Yes, I do.
And how do you know Miss Stapleton?
She was the AP calculus teacher before retiring at the end of the 2018-19 school year.
And what was your relationship like with Miss Stapleton?
We didn't get along particularly well. While her classes always performed well on the standardized test, she did have some strange teaching methods. I suggested that she change to more of a conventional teaching method, to which she refused.
And why do you care about individual teachers' teaching methods?
Our school is 2,000 students and a multitude of teachers who all teach those students. I'm in charge of all of those teachers and must manage the learning of all of our students. In order to be an effective team, teachers and administration must work together. We can't have people off doing their own thing that may work for them, but may be detrimental to the group as a whole.
Do you feel that Miss Stapleton understood that?
No, I don't think she did. I consider her to be insubordinate and unwilling to change after teaching the same way for 35 years.
So based on your observations, do you think Miss Stapleton liked or respected you?
No, I don't, but based on how she treated me and then just refused to work with me.
Did you joke at a meeting with other teachers about low achieving students getting in trouble and then being removed from school on the day of the standardized test so that they couldn't take the test, and that would raise the test scores?
Yes, I did.
Can you kind of explain your joking?
Typically, students who are chronic troublemakers are also those who do not do as well in class because they don't want to listen or engage in the class material. I joked that if they weren't in class on the day of the test and couldn't take the test, their low test scores wouldn't drag down the average.
So was this statement a joke, or were you seriously considering this as a way to get test scores up?
It was purely a joke.
Was this statement aimed at any one student in particular?
No, it wasn't.
So let's turn to Carson Connors and the events that transpired on April 27th, 2019. What would have happened if Carson Connors had gone to your office with Miss Smith after those events occurred?
If Carson had not refused initially to come to my office and mouthed off to Miss Smith, causing the SROs to get involved, we would have been able to handle his discipline within the school's discipline system. But because the school police had to get involved, it became a criminal matter that was completely out of my hands.
Do you know the dates that Carson was out of school due to this incident?
Yes, his due process hearing was held on May 1st, and he was suspended after that. He returned to school on May 8th, 2019.
Have you seen, one second. Have you seen the study by Dr. Avery Johnson suggesting a spike in suspensions just prior to the administration of the standardized tests?
Yes, I have.
So do you have an opinion on this study and its findings?
Objection, Foundation.
I'm sorry, Judge, we
Your
can't.
mute is on, Your Honor.
I'd like to hear argument on that from the state.
Dr. Crosby has no training or experience or education that would allow her to have a valid opinion on the study or its findings. Anything she says is merely speculation or assumption.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Again, this is based on this witness's observations as the school administrator.
I'll allow her to answer, but go carefully, please.
I don't believe that correlation causes causation. There could be a number of reasons for this alleged spike in suspensions. Toward the end of the year, when most of these tests are given, many students have become sick of school, become restless, and sometimes act out.
Based on your knowledge of the events that occurred on April 27, 2019, do you believe Carson Connors is guilty of disorderly conduct?
Yes, I do.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, Dr. Crosby.
Dr. Crosby, you are now subject to cross-examination by the defense. Proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hi, Dr. Crosby. As vice principal, you're in charge of managing the teachers and disciplining the students. Is that correct?
Correct.
So when a student gets disciplined, is it standard procedure for that student to first visit your office before any sort of police would get involved?
Yes.
But in this situation, Carson never spoke to you or saw you before he was arrested, correct?
As far as I am aware, yes.
So his arrest was not following the standard procedure, right?
I was not involved in it because it was completely out of my jurisdiction once the criminal justice system was involved.
But he never went through the standard school procedure for discipline by going to you first. Is that right?
I don't have enough sufficient information to answer that.
Okay. Did you ever talk about having students arrested for minor infractions, jokingly or otherwise?
Like I mentioned earlier, I did make a joke during a staff meeting.
So you did discuss with other teachers about having students arrested for minor infractions. Is that correct?
As a joke, correct.
And did you believe that have students arrested in this way would reduce class size and get your test scores up?
No.
But you swore to that in your testimony earlier that this was your, as you say, a joke, that you thought having these students arrested would get your test scores up. Is that correct?
Not that would ever be acted upon.
But you did discuss it with students or with other teachers, right?
Correct.
Are you pressured to have high test scores yourself for the school?
I would assume that as an administrator, it's my responsibility to make sure that they are higher scores, but I am not directly affected per my performance. That's on the teachers.
And so do you in turn put pressure on your teachers to get those high test scores?
Yes.
And did you put pressure on Miss Smith in particular to get her test scores up this year?
I did have a conversation with her during her performance evaluation, yes.
And did you tell her that there would be consequences this year if she didn't get her test scores up?
For her professional evaluation, yes.
Is that because she's had several years of bad test scores in a row?
Yes.
Did you see or witness the events that transpired on April 27th?
No, I did not.
So your testimony of believing that Carson is guilty is just an assumption based on what you've heard?
Based on prior experiences with him.
And based on what Ms. Smith and Officer Jones will testify here today?
Correct.
Do you usually micromanage a teacher's teaching method?
No, I don't believe so.
You usually probably state your expectations and expect your teachers to meet those.
Correct.
So do you think it sets a good examples for your teachers that you are allegedly joking about getting low achieving students in trouble and being removed for school during testing?
Can you repeat that?
Do you think it sets a good example for the teachers who are technically underneath you professionally by joking about getting low achieving students into trouble and being removed from school for testing?
No.
Do you think that sets a good example?
No.
Do you think that kind of behavior garners respect?
I think everybody in our professional experience has made comments that they wish that they could take back. That was essentially one of them. But I would expect all of my colleagues to understand that as well.
Do you think you gain respect from having a comment like that, or do you think that doesn't really help your professional image?
It doesn't, but I would think that everybody would have those experiences.
But you're in an administrative position, so in your opinion, you're probably not in a great position to make jokes like that for your fellow teachers who are underneath you, correct?
That's correct.
And without Carson and several other lower achieving students taking the test, did Miss Smith manage to get her scores up this year?
I would have to go back and look. We haven't had our evaluations at this time.
That is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any redirect?
Yes, one moment, Your Honor. All right, I'm ready to proceed. All right, Dr. Crosby, going back to that joke that has been kind of the center of your testimony here today, you were joking around in a more informal setting, correct?
Correct. The response of it, everyone in the room was talking and laughing. Nobody had given me the notion that they were offended, nor that they took my comments seriously.
So you and the other teachers periodically, you're not always 100% serious. You joke around. Is that right?
Correct. We wouldn't make it through, these tough moments if we didn't have a sense of humor.
And is it safe to say that sometimes we in life make jokes that we don't 100% believe in or we are not intending to act upon?
Absolutely.
So you alluded to this on cross-examination, but it's standard procedure for students to go to your office first when they are being disciplined, except for when the police get involved and the student is being unruly and refuses to cooperate with the school discipline system. Is that correct?
Correct.
To your knowledge, Carson Connors wasn't the only student to miss the standardized test and have to do the makeup test. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. That's all I have. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any recross?
I just have one question, Your Honor.
Based on the limited redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Dr. Crosby, do you believe it's within your job description to set a good example for your fellow teachers that are underneath you professionally?
Professionally, yes, but I also believe we're all human.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Crosby.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Crosby, thank you for your testimony. You are excused at this time.
All right, thank you.
Does the state have any further witnesses?
The state has no further witnesses, Your Honor, and the state rests.
Then we'll recess, and at the when we resume, the defense will start their case.
Yes, Your Honor.
Court is at recess.